Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. I'm Brianna and that is Courtney.
Hello.
So this week on Murder Dictionary, we are starting a brand new letter. We're moving on to letter G. And before we get into the case that we're covering tonight,
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online.
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
And learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
wanted to remind you of a few things that are going to be in our description. So you can always find links to our resources if you want to read more about the case that we cover. You can also find links to our social media if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then you can also find the links to our Patreon and our Threadless. So if you want to join our Patreon, you can get access to bonus episodes and stuff. It's at patreon.com/murderdictionary. And we have a few new people on our Patreon this week. So we wanted to say thank you to Bridget, who increased her pledge, and someone, I know I'm going to mess up this pronunciation, so bear with me. It says Traduce or Traduce. It's TRA. What do you think?
TRADUC?
Traduce.
Traduce?
I'm going to just say Traduce because I like the way it sounds.
Okay.
I'm going to go with that.
Let's go with it.
If your name is Tra, I apologize.
It could be Traduce.
And also, we want to say thank you to Rebecca and Rachel.
Thank you.
So thanks, you guys. Coincidentally, Rebecca and Rachel are the names of my elementary school bullies. So deep down in my heart, I hope that it's them.
I do
They're
too.
like, we're sorry. We fucked up.
For sure.
So thank you guys for being on our Patreon. We just have a couple new bonus episodes from a few weeks ago up there, and we're going to record another one soon. So keep an eye out for that. And again, if you want to join our Patreon, it's patreon.com/murderdictionarypodcast. So with all that said, we are moving on to G for gamers.
Gaming.
Yes. This is eye-opening because you and I before the show are just like, nobody should play video games ever. Like,
No, this is horrific.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy.
The facts, numbers, statistics on gaming and really like adults, okay, whatever. Child brain.
Right.
Is what I'm horrified at.
During the developmental process, during the teenage years when things are very influential, playing games has proven to not be so great for you.
I feel like an adult, you can geek out for a while and then kind of step back and go, whoa, that was a crazy couple hours, couple days, whatever it may be, right? And you can kind of bring it back because you have life experience. Your brain has theoretically been fully formed for a while. But when you're little, you have nothing to gauge it.
Yes.
It made me nervous. And I know I sound like a serious square. Okay.
No, I get it. I totally understand.
I want everyone for the next 3. I'm just absolutely square Courtney.
Yeah.
And I'm not that into gaming. I'm not a video game person since Caveman Olympics on Nintendo. Like 88.
Right.
That's it. Nintendo.
That's really one of the last games you've played?
The Duck Hunt.
For real?
mean,
wow.
I've never played, like you name Zeldas and all these games that people talk about. Never. Tetris, okay. Blackjack, casino games.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't. Mario Kart, my cousins had it when I was a kid. They live out in the desert, so they had every video game because that's all there is to do.
Right.
But that's it.
You had no exposure to the ones that basically people say cause the kind of crimes that we're going to talk about, like the first-person shooters you've never played?
No, none of it. None of it.
Okay.
Once I was in high school and junior high, I'm going to people's houses, they're playing video games. I would just sit there and be like, this is dumb. You can play. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go do something else.
Right.
I was not about it.
Well, there was sort of a boom in the video game industry where things that were fighting violence games, first-person shooters, became a lot more popular when we were around junior high school.
That's exactly.
There was kind of this second wave of gaming. Yeah.
Because Street Fighter, childhood.
Yes.
And then, there's not much. And then there's, Grand Theft Autos, Call of Duties. Are these the names of things? Is that correct? I've been told.
You are doing great.
I've heard it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I fake it really well. Thank God.
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies of the effects of video games. And especially like you said, I mean, it's slightly different with adults because they're a little bit less easily influenced, we should say.
They should be.
They should be.
They should be.
Hopefully. But it is been proven that adults are also really susceptible to having certain brain changes, certain mood changes, just as a result of playing video games. It's pretty common to be aggressive after playing. If nothing else, to just be more confrontational, if that makes sense. And there is this kind of period after you're gaming. If you're playing for 10 minutes, you're kind of in that place where you're a little bit more aggressive for 10 minutes after. That's what studies have been showing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, excitement, flashing lights. Great, blah. And then you turn it off and you're in your kitchen.
Right.
And now you're trying to figure out what to eat.
So even though I do really enjoy games and I have had some experience and history with playing, I still was a little bit taken aback by this. After looking into gamers and crimes that have any sort of gaming component to them, I definitely got a little freaked out. Like, yeah, everybody should probably keep their kids away from them. But that's just, if you don't think about it and you're not looking into it, you kind of don't find that information, Or I assume that it's like the way that it's always on the news, like scare tactic stuff. Like, if your kid plays a game, they're going to kill someone. It's like, well, we know that's not true. There's not a direct, like, point A, point B link.
So I know somebody who was at a Walmart, because you know how you're saying, this applies, I'm sorry. You're saying how, a lot of people don't necessarily know because of whatever. And also, like, parents don't know. They don't have a clue. My, I don't want to rat her out. Sorry. Someone I know. She said that she was at Walmart and was buying, I want to say it was Grand Theft Auto. Came out last year or two. And the lady at Walmart stopped her, put her hand on the game and says, "Do you know what this game is? Do you know what they do in this game?" And the little child is standing there and just looking all like, "Oh, I don't know what. I just want my mom to give me this game." She's like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "They buy hookers and they do cocaine in this game." And she's just like, "Nope, not doing it," but had no idea. No, people don't know.
Right.
Sorry, continue.
No,
it's just, I don't know either.
But I think that there's just kind of this really black and white divide on this one. There's people that are into the games that just really enjoy it and they think it's completely harmless. And then there's people that look like the, bowl cut mom that wants to see the manager. And they're just terrified that it's ruining all of our children. But I think, from what we've been looking into, I'm kind of leaning more in the middle at this point. Like, you just have to make sure that someone is developmentally ready to watch or to play violent video games. But at the same time, you can't really deny that there is some causing aggression that happens when you're playing the games.
I agree.
So
you gotta get some fresh air too,
Yeah, but I don't want to sit here and just be another one of those manager ladies, So there's a middle ground.
Don't worry.
You can be the square for us.
It's fine with me.
I appreciate that. So this week, when I was kind of researching and looking for more information, not only about gaming crimes, I also wanted to look into what's behind that, about all the studies that have been done, and get a little bit more information about the link between violence and video gaming. So both the American Psychological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics have spoken out against children and teens at impressionable ages playing violent video games. Although it is widely accepted that video games don't have a positive impact on children, it is estimated that more than 90% of children in the United States play video games. Even if you aren't that lady that's really freaked out and terrified and yelling on the news, most people know that it's not necessarily the most healthy thing for kids.
I hope.
Even if it's not leading to criminality and violence, I think people know that it's at minimum very sedentary,
Yes.
you know? But if you look into, like I said, the American Psychological Association, et cetera, have said it's flat out bad for your kids. So the number goes up to 97% for kids between the ages of 12 and 17. So we know now, at this day and age, most kids are playing video games.
As I always have to in my head to make it make sense. That's 97 out of 100 kids.
Right.
That's 3 that aren't playing.
3 kids in all, 100 high school kids are not playing video games. So everyone is doing it. And most of them are violent, Over 85% of video games on the market contain some sort of violence. So now, right, 97% of kids are playing them. 85% of those games are violent. That's a pretty drastic number.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the American Academy of Pediatrics warned that, quote, video games should not use human or other living targets to award points for killing because this teaches children to associate pleasure and success with their ability to cause pain and suffering to others.
When I read that, I thought that actually made a lot of sense. And at first, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, we're all going to be squares here. Like, these guys are going to be like, don't play video games. You know what I mean? But that made sense. Yeah, you don't, probably not the best to reinforce points, Makes sense. But, again, this is fantasy and we're supposed to know the difference.
Yeah, that was kind of the epiphany that I had when I saw that specifically. I was like, oh,
me too.
Yeah, I am receiving some sort of reward or positive reaction by just killing another being in this video game.
I had never thought of that.
And just the repeated learning of that has got to have a negative effect. Even me as an adult playing video games, I was like, oh, well, I'm trying to win. That's all that is. But you don't think about the fact that winning equals harming something else. And so if you're a young child, that target age between 12 and 17, like they were talking about, where 97% of them are playing, that's a pretty brutal lesson to just teach directly a positive response for inflicting harm on something else. So that's pretty jarring. But again, I feel like a square just saying that.
Just call me Kate Gosselin.
Right?
I'd like to speak to the manager.
True. It's every time I picture her. That's the person I picture.
I want someone higher up than you.
Exactly.
Give me corporate's number.
So the American Psychological Association, APA, considers violent video games a risk factor for aggression. Again, you can't really say point A to point B, but at minimum, it creates a higher risk.
Well, in the military, don't they have I'm not in the military, nor have been, but they have them play, I believe they're called simulations.
Right.
But
that's exactly the same thing as video games.
It's the same
it really
thing.
is.
And they're training the purpose. Oh God, I'm freaking out. How did I not put all this together?
It all comes together when you actually look at it.
It's just something I don't care. I'm not into it.
Well,
Kirby is like the last video game I played and it was on a Game Boy. Like very few and far between.
Yeah, it's easy to take it for granted that this is just, well, we've had video games since we've been kids because that's been within our lifetime. But we don't really think about the effect that has.
I just remembered it. It was Guitar Hero. That is the last thing that I put. But I mean, that's not real. But that was awesome.
Everybody played that
awesome.
one. But you're safe if you play that one. That one's
so
not
far.
violent. It's not rewarding you for harming anything. So, yeah.
Just for knowing, what's that song? Smoke on the Water really well.
That's what you really deserve to be rewarded for,
Yeah.
In 2017, the American Psychological Association Task Force on Violent Media concluded that violent video game exposure was linked to increased aggressive behaviors, thoughts, and emotions, as well as decreased empathy. And that was a really big key. So not only is it creating this sense of wanting to be aggressive, but also you really don't care if something bad happens to someone else.
You don't feel bad.
Which is really interesting to me.
I don't
Just
like this.
Whoa. The APA concluded that violent video games can desensitize people to seeing aggressive behavior and not only decrease empathy, but also decrease pro-social behaviors, such as helping a person in need. So a person that plays a lot of video games, especially a child that plays a lot of violent video games, is less likely to intervene if they see someone be bullied, for example, or if they see someone that needs help, because their empathy is going to be less than those that don't play violent video games.
I'm with that.
Pretty interesting.
The APA is kind of like the EPA in the Ghostbusters movie. They're just here to wah, wah, your whole operation. But he's not wrong.
No, it's accurate. It's true. It's not very fun to look at.
It's got an asshole behavior about it, but whatever.
Christopher Bartlett, a psychologist at Iowa State University, led a research team that had 47 undergraduates play violent video games for 15 minutes. And it compared the data to students who played video games that were not violent. Their study found that the violent video game players were found to behave more aggressively after gaming, and they were even more likely to play painful pranks on people when the researchers gave them the option. So what they did was they set up this experiment where they gave the violent video game players and non-violent video game players the option to feed people hot sauce that didn't like spicy food.
Don't like this.
It seems very simple, right?
No, I hate spicy food. This is bullshit.
But it is a situation where that's not that terrible of a thing. Nobody's getting permanently harmed here, but it's just not caring about the fact that someone is going to be uncomfortable.
You're willing to make someone else uncomfortable, whereas maybe you wouldn't have been so likely.
Right.
We have to do our own research group here.
So, but they definitely found that the people playing, Pokemon Go or whatever, they wouldn't give someone hot sauce. They're like,
into
well,
fitness.
Yeah, this person can handle their own food. That's none of my business.
Yeah.
The people that were playing the violent video games, they were the ones that actually said, give the person the hot sauce. It'll be funny, as though that person being in pain is amusing. The study showed that in these 47 people they studied, it made a difference, the violence versus the nonviolence in the video games.
I feel like this is just somebody who's an asshole anyway.
There
don't
is
help.
sort of a chicken and the egg argument.
There is every time on this.
Not so much maybe when they're really, really little, but if you're talking about these college kids,
Exactly.
It could just be the asshole group of people wants to play the violent video games because they're assholes, and then in turn also wants to play the prank because they're assholes. We don't know. But they seem to be feeling like it was conclusive enough to say that that made a big difference. A study at Brock University in Ontario concluded that high school students who played violent video games had a higher incidence of verbal altercations and also schoolyard fights.
Oh my gosh. I have seen and heard some of the most insane things coming out of the headset of a 9-year-old playing video games. And the things that he will say when he thinks nobody's listening, and he'll just say it back to them. They'll say this, and you're just like, what the? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I just seriously, everyone, I'm sorry. My head just exploded because, yeah, oh my God, he's so quick to argue and argumentative and just, make fun of. And I'm sure that's just a small part. But when it's your peer group is this headset talking, and on the game and on the TV, and that's all you really know is like you're a cool guy if you can put them down, right?
Right.
Like you're an asshole. The biggest asshole is with the most points.
Exactly.
And oh my God, my brain just exploded. I have to go home right now. Sorry. I got to make a phone call.
Right? You got some things to do.
No, it makes perfect sense because that's wow.
Yeah, I mean, this study really concluded what a lot of people are seeing in their households is that children will become very aggressive, they will fight a lot, and I mean, it's really played out in the schoolyard, the difference between people that are playing violent games and not.
Wow.
So, like we said earlier, there are some psychologists that argue that aggressive children are actually the ones most likely to seek out the violent video games. And therefore, of course, they're more likely to have schoolyard fights. So we can't really definitively conclude that video games were the cause. So some psychologists argue that it's debatable. The one thing that is certain is that there has not been a study that directly links violent video game exposure to more extreme and violent criminal behavior. So there's a big difference between saying, yes, this child or whoever may argue more, they may even get in fights more, but they're not necessarily going to go out and murder someone because they played a video game. So there hasn't been a study directly on that. And it seems like it's not really provable at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things going on.
Yeah.
Factors.
Exactly. One of the biggest takeaways from many of the studies on video games and violence is that video games alone do not cause violence. It really has to be a combination of a bunch of other stuff.
It's like satanic panic and horror movies make you,
right?
What is it? Sacrifice children to the devil.
It's always just a combination of a bunch of things. In all cases where a perpetrator is found to play violent video games, they always have these additional risk factors like a history of abuse, bullying, untreated mental health issues, social isolation is a big one, etc. So it's not just one thing. It's not just a perfectly normal, healthy, perfect background, spotless everything, and then plays a video game once and goes out and kills someone. It's never going to be that situation. They always find additional risk factors.
I'm so worried right now.
Yeah.
Like,
I see you having a total breakdown over there. You're just like, we've got to save the kids.
Yeah, I've never felt more like
You've
Kate
never
Gosselin in my life. Get all my kids
know.
off the games.
I see it happening before my very eyes.
I'm like turning red.
And I totally didn't mean to do that when I started looking into all these things because I was just like, well, we need the information. If we're doing G for gamers, we need all the info. I didn't mean to scare the shit out of you.
What just hit me was when you said that there were certain things that always are present. And I think that the other thing like that is also a younger kid that is exposed and like his only real friend group are older kids.
Right. Right.
Because that kid now has to hang with the older kids. And so he's got to talk shit. He's got to be tough. Whatever the environment is, this younger kid now has to assimilate to be cool.
Right.
To be part of this group. And if that's playing games, whatever the hell it may be, whenever you see this all the time, it's always like, the younger kid trying to hang with the big boys. Problems. It just came to me when you were saying that. I was like, oh my God, no.
Yeah. Video games are not. That's oftentimes the case, but with video games, it's worse.
Well, I just know that like even when I was younger, like a lot of younger brothers who are now, problems, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting to be, especially on the online gaming community, right? Because if you're just alone playing whatever and it's not associated with another person, it's slightly different than when you do have the headset like you were talking about, when there's another person that can respond to you, when you can actually meet a group of friends, start playing games together.
Ignore your family.
That too.
Sure.
But then now you're playing with people that are older.
Yes.
And not just teenagers,
No.
not just like, 9 to 11. No, we're talking about like 9 to 30-year-olds.
They're going to lie to you and be like, hey, if you give me all your points, I'll give you extra lives. And then you do that. And then you start crying because this 30-year-old just tricked you, little kid, into giving all. It's like this whole hierarchy. And it's just, continue.
I have to say, just from my own personal experience, the worst gamers that I've come in contact with are generally 13-year-olds, like tween teenage. It's very strange. So the way that you're bringing up the example of like a 30-year-old taking advantage of the kid, in my experience, it's usually these crazy ass tiny little kids saying literally the worst things I've ever heard. The worst things that have ever come into my ears have been through 13-year-old kids on video games. So it's very strange.
So the only reason I bring up that very specific thing is because I've seen it happen.
Really?
I have seen this shit happen myself. And then I've, over the course of time, seen this small person evolve. And the way that he speaks over the headset has changed. The way he interacts has changed. Because I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Ever. I just hear the anger and the aggression, and then I see the way these kids act after the fact. And it's not the kid. It's not the same person. And yeah.
But that does
hysterics when it comes to this stuff. Like the world's gonna end
Life
and
and
there's
death.
nothing left, and it's your fault, and it's crazy.
Yeah. But it is like over time you do see that progression because they're exposed
It's
to
addiction too. It's like what addiction does to you. You turn into a different person because your brain changes.
Yes, and gaming is totally
Yeah.
a possible addiction for sure.
Completely.
Yeah.
But you can be like 6 and addicted, like the little kid in Thailand smoking cigarettes.
Right.
And they just watch him smoke. No one's taking the cigarettes from him. They just hand him another pack.
Yeah, it is weird to see. It is sad to see the progression of child that's just becoming more and more aggressive and violent and whatever, when you knew them to be not so.
Yes.
Before they were hanging out with these other kids on video games.
These kids aren't even real.
Yeah.
Oh God, continue.
I've
Please.
never felt more like a super mom in my life.
We don't have kids.
We don't have kids.
We are each other's kid.
I have nieces and nephews. So,
exactly. That's what,
But yeah, I know that I sound like Kate Gosselin right now, but I'm scared.
No, I absolutely, I think that Super Nanny is more reasonable than I am at this moment. Like
Yes.
Joe Frost she would be so much fun because I feel for any child that ever wants to talk to me about video games again, because now I've got statistics and like the APA says kid isn't gonna care, but
You're totally going to try and reason with them.
he's just gonna like hold his finger up to my face and try to like dome me and be like, you didn't respawn. Oh my God.
The case that we're discussing tonight takes place kind of towards the beginning of the first-person shooter game boom, the one like we were talking about earlier. So we had really yet to see the studies on the effects of video games, which means it was really easy for video games to become the scapegoat in this case that we're discussing tonight. And we saw a lot of this around that era, you know what I mean?
I remember.
It's, 90s, early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
There was just, whenever something happened and it was someone that was a teenager, it was like, well, did they play video games? Like, they're the devil.
Labels and the restriction labels
Yes.
and, all that stuff was going on too.
It almost, not completely, but almost became kind of like a satanic panic situation, right? Where it was like, this
Shades
was
of satanic panic.
the scapegoat that we're using to deal with any sort of issues with teens, But there's been a lot of those things.
I also, with the Christian community, it was also very much like violent video games and porn go hand in hand. So like Falwell and all that, it went the same. Can't have porn, can't have video games.
Right.
Hand in hand. Get rid of it all.
It was completely villainized at this time. So Devin Moore was born as Devin Darnell Thompson on May 15th, 1985 in Fayette, Alabama. In the first few years of his life, Devin was severely neglected. His mother developed a drug addiction that led to further neglect, as well as some physical and emotional abuse. By all accounts, I mean, Devin was that kid that grew up at the most risk. I mean, he went through a lot.
Yeah, just by himself.
Yes. Either on his own or being victimized. That was just his entire youth.
Yeah, it was sink or swim.
It was so sad, actually. Devin was then sent to live with his father once his mother's addiction got really bad. But his father was clearly just the lesser of two evils because they were both unfit parents. His dad was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. So his mother was always not around. She was completely in the throes of substance abuse. But his father was overbearing. He was extremely religious. He was very disciplinary. And although he was more put together than Devin's mother, he was extremely disciplinarian to the point where he was just cold and standoffish and really harsh towards his son. The one thing that his mother and father did have in common was that they were both emotionally and physically abusive to Devin. So no matter where he went to either parent, both of them were abusive. According to his dad, he had trouble disciplining Devin in his teens, but it seems like Devin had probably a pretty defiant and rebellious teenage years because of how his father was hurting him. It's another one of those chicken and egg situations. Like, was he rebellious just on his own, or was he reacting to the fact that his parents were mistreating him?
Yeah, chicken and egg. It's probably both.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know those people that it's like, well, yeah, they're rebelling, but that's because their parents are shitty.
Yeah.
You know? A psychologist would later find that Devin had been suffering from PTSD, of course, resulting from this long-term abuse that he'd suffered. Although he did have a troubled childhood and subsequently struggled with his mental health, he had an otherwise uneventful youth. So even though it's clear that his parents were pretty awful to him, he did stay out of trouble. Despite the fact his dad was insisting that he was tough to discipline, he never really had any criminal record. He didn't have any trouble with finishing school, so he completed high school and graduated, and really nothing on his record. The hobby that occupied most of Devin's free time, of course, is video games. And one of the most popular games at the time was Grand Theft Auto, and it was by far Devin's favorite game.
I remember everyone was obsessed with this game. I mean, I don't give a shit, but GTA, Grand Theft Auto, it was a big deal. That was huge.
Yeah.
I sound like an old woman.
I'm not judging. I'm feeling the same way. I was like, yeah, I remember everybody was playing this game.
Yeah.
And everywhere you went, it was like if you were at someone's house, they had the game. They're like, oh, you want to play GTA?
And I remember like the cover, the artwork was it was parodied, and like, you know, they did all kinds of t-shirts on Venice Beach, everything, you know,
Yes.
was made into the San Andreas, or not San Andreas, that's later, but the Grand Theft Auto logo, picture, all of it.
It had a certain style to it.
Yes.
It was a kind of
like pop
comic
art
looking thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was parodied a lot, but it was, you could easily recognize it on anything.
Immediately.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about it all the time. It was just, that's what everyone talked about.
Yeah.
But this was also, you know, kids.
Right.
That's what we're going to talk about.
So Devin was not ready to go directly to college after he graduated high school. So he decided to enlist in the Air Force. And most likely, my theory is that this was the quickest way for him to get away from his parents, right?
And he had no criminal record.
Right. So he could get into the military.
Good to go. Done.
And I mean, they had been so awful to him for so long. And he probably, even if he wanted to go to college, who knows if they would have been able to support him financially.
Doesn't seem like an option.
Right. So I think to him, this was one of his escape routes.
He can get it, all of it, get the degree, travel, do all this, get away, make some money, meet some chick on base,
Right.
Put her there. It'll be great.
Yeah. And if nothing else, just live away from them.
And his family can't afford to do anything. So yeah, this makes perfect sense for him. I think actually it was a really good setup. He was like the ideal candidate for someone, there's certain people that out of high school go in the military and they are not. They're dishonorably discharged shortly after.
Right.
Then there's people that are totally fine, made for structure and military like that. And he probably would have thrived because he never had it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
Yeah.
is he probably craved some sort of order and structure and boundaries coming from a background where it was just so terrible.
He did really good in school.
Right.
So he could follow rules. He was able.
He had the potential to do well at whatever he put his mind to. If he wanted to pass his classes, he could. He stayed out of trouble. But at the same time, he really wasn't in a home environment where he could thrive. So it would probably be best for him to be in the military.
Yeah, I think so.
So he had arranged to take the summer off after he graduated, and then he was scheduled to report for duty after the summer. On June 7th, 2003, at about 3 a.m., Officer Arnold Strickland and Officer James Crump noticed a vehicle parked in a restaurant parking lot. So they called in the plate, and dispatch informed them that the vehicle was stolen. So they approached the car, and they found Devin sleeping inside. So somehow this kid that had no criminal record and was about to go away to the military had stolen a car and was just sleeping inside it?
I mean, yeah, huh?
That's the first part that blows my mind.
Same here. I thought the same exact thing immediately.
And half of me wants to just think, okay, well, maybe the home stuff was so bad that he was like, I got to go somewhere. Let me just take a car and I'll sleep in there. And then the other part of it is, well, that's something that you do in Grand Theft Auto. You just take cars and it doesn't matter.
That to me seems so clear. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah, the parallel between what happens in the game and what he did in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's very strange that out of nowhere, after no trouble, he just
and
takes
you've got
a car.
the military hanging over your head, your enlistment and stuff. So it is out of character.
You're risking everything.
And there's no mention of alcohol or drugs.
No.
Maybe he'd been on, he had a good one, drank a 12-pack himself and then stole a car. Nothing like that.
No.
He's totally sober.
Yes.
Can't even buy it anyway. He's like 17
Right.
when I think about it.
It really doesn't make sense. It
Not at
seems
all.
to come so out of nowhere.
Seems desperate.
But it is one of the components that makes people feel like this is even more related to Grand Theft Auto.
Yes.
There's a strong argument there for sure. So, of course, the officers come up, they find him sleeping, and they just wake him up, search the car, and they take him into custody. Really uneventful. He was reportedly very cooperative during the whole ordeal. He remained really calm as Officer Strickland booked him inside the Fayette police station. Everything was going fine. While they were processing Devin, a report came in that there had been a burglary of a dry cleaner's close by where Devin had taken the stolen car. So since the dry cleaner thief had stolen money and clothes, he left behind fingerprints and also a shoe print.
Also saw that Officer Arnold Strickland, who was so well known in this tiny town, they just called him Arnold.
Oh,
Right? He walked up to the car, and when he looked in before he woke him up, he noticed that there was dry cleaning clothes on the passenger seat. And so he just, thought that, just kind of like took that into account, whatever. So then later as things go, it's like a slow kind of click.
All
click,
the information's coming
click.
in.
Yeah. And so it doesn't make sense at first, but then it's like, oh, okay, maybe this is what happened.
Or it doesn't seem related until they
Exactly.
find out that there's another crime at a dry cleaner's.
Yes.
So once they know that there's prints left.
Because I wondered how to,
Yeah.
okay, but like, how do you put this all together? And then, that makes sense. He's got dry cleaning clothes with I'm sure it said like Zeppelin cleaners on the thing, right?
Right.
Right there.
Yeah, I thought that it was just because the car was stolen like on the same block. So they were like, oh, these two crimes happened. Let's just make sure that we
Tiny
rule this
town.
kid out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like it was point A, point B kind of
Cop
thing.
has one name.
Yeah, right. First name basis for the cops, you kind of
It's
draw
Mayberry.
those parallels. Yes. Yeah. So when the officers got the information that that crime took place so close, it was decided that they should take fingerprints and shoe prints, assuming, of course, that Devin may have been involved. And like you said, the fact that there's dry cleaner stuff in the back of the car, it just makes that even clearer. So they've got to get his information and see if he was the one. They temporarily removed Devin's handcuffs in the process of taking fingerprints, and they removed his shoes to take shoe print impressions. So as he had his handcuffs off and they're collecting this additional evidence, officers Strickland and Crump began telling him that he would most likely spend a few years in jail for these charges.
I saw an interview about this too. They said that he was kind of one of those that when you would question him, he would just sort of disassociate and just kind of stare and just like, okay, listening to it kind of sounded like a Brendan Avery quality to me. He's so young that it's just kind of like going over his head. And he just kind of is like, oh my God. And it's probably in his head just building up and like, oh my God, oh my God. But his face, nothing. Shows no emotion.
Well, dissociation is really, really common in anyone that has PTSD. So I also think it might be something that, you know, because he grew up in such an abusive household, he learned to kind of just shut down when he got too stressed.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that he would, like you said, just have sort of this blank look because he's so stressed that he has to go to his faraway place.
And underneath, he could be boiling, just freaking out inside. But on the outside, he's just stoic.
Yeah.
And they noted that.
That's interesting. Yeah, it seems like maybe it's just some coping mechanism where he just wasn't all there, you know, in those moments.
Well,
he
I
had
think
to
it's
go
also,
away.
it's kind of how this crime happened.
Right.
They
where
were
he,
comfortable.
yeah.
They thought he was just,
Because he was so calm, they trusted him more.
that's what I'm trying to say. Thank
Right.
you. Yes.
So it's really unclear if Devin was asking about the sentence and the length of time in jail or if the officers were just choosing to tell him. But the information clearly sent him into a panic. And even if he was dissociated, he kind of put the pieces together and realized how much he had at stake in this moment, you know, that he was going to lose everything that he planned for his future. So he reacted to this onset of panic by grabbing Officer Strickland's service pistol, at which point the officer started yelling and attempted to grab the gun back. Devin says that after he had the gun and heard the screaming, he, quote, freaked out and things didn't go as planned. So Devin just started shooting. He raised the gun up and shot Officer Strickland once in the head. He died at the scene. Officer James Crump was just out of view and rounded the corner when he heard, of course, his partner yelling. As soon as Officer Crump was in sight, Devin fired once again and hit James Crump in the head. Devin made his way towards the exit and he ran into the 911 dispatcher named Leslie Mealer on his way to the exit. He took aim again, pulled the trigger 5 times, and shot Leslie in the head before running out the door.
He killed the entire night crew of that police station in like 3 minutes and less. The entire night crew of that little tiny police station in this town.
It's crazy. Just a small, very quiet, routine night. I think that may have contributed. Like you said, he did have a calm demeanor, but also this was a small crew that's used to, you know, not too much crazy stuff. So why not just take the handcuffs off and print him? You know?
It's almost
Seem
like,
normal.
It's almost like if you want to take it again to this, like, you know, Grand Theft Auto level. It's like he went through and just cleared a level.
Exactly.
Room to room. Boom, 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 boom. Done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very, very exactly out of a scene from Grand Theft Auto.
Neutralized and left.
Yep. Once Devin was outside, he realized that he had actually forgotten his shoe. So he turned around and attempted to go retrieve it. But the door had locked behind him. So he made his way to the fire station, which, of course, it's a little town. It was right next door. And he told a couple firefighters that something bad had happened next door. So firefighters and paramedics arrived next door to find Arnold Strickland, James Crump, and Leslie Mueller all laying in pools of blood inside the police station. And they were all pronounced dead at the scene. While first responders were assessing the scene inside the police station, Devin was outside stealing a police cruiser.
Yeah, he got Arnold's keys.
Yep.
And he took Arnold's car.
Again, just directly out of Grand Theft Auto. Devin got all the way to Columbus, Mississippi before the cruiser was spotted. And of course, when they did find him, they knew that Devin still had Officer Strickland's .40 caliber pistol, so they had to proceed with caution. Fortunately, Devin had calmed down by this point, and he wasn't really trying to escalate things to a shootout, thankfully. So after just a short standoff where they were trying to figure things out, Devin was apprehended and taken into custody. As he was being placed under arrest, Devin told the officers, quote, "Life is like a video game. Everybody's got to die sometime."
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
I feel like the parallel still would have been drawn even if he didn't say that, but that made it even worse in the media,
Yeah.
you know? That made people really freak out. So when they got him into custody, Devin confessed to everything. He said, quote, "After I got his pistol, the officer started screaming and I freaked out and started shooting."
That sounds like the most honest portrayal of what happened.
Yeah.
You know?
It was pretty cut and dry. I mean, that's directly what happened. It's absolutely unbelievably tragic that he just killed 3 officers just out of nowhere, you know? But it really, there was no other thing that he could say. I'm sure they had surveillance in there. The police station had to have cameras. So, I mean, he's got to just say what happened.
I imagine that in maybe his argument or something, you know, I was just going to scare him and tell him to let me leave. But then he started yelling, right? And then it was a problem. And he got freaked out, you know? And then he had to fix it, had to end it, take care of it all.
Usually we see a lot of people that are just trying to downplay it, like, oh, because of the yelling this happened. But he was pretty straightforward, like, oh, it scared me, but like I shot them.
Yeah.
You know, that's just what happened. Pretty matter of fact, you know?
Yeah. Super honest.
Yeah, we don't see that very often.
No, we don't.
After Devin was charged with the murders, his father, Kenneth, came forward to say that his son had always been difficult and he had trouble disciplining him for years. His father also said that he deserved to be charged with capital murder.
That's a lot.
Kenneth Moore said, quote, "You live by the sword, you die by it. That's the Bible. God works in mysterious ways."
Oh, well, God works in mysterious ways. So
this
it's
dad pisses me off so much.
even if he's right in that you murder someone, you deserve to be punished for the murder. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What?
The fact that he would say that about his kid and be so detached, it just speaks volumes about who the fuck he is as a parent, you know?
He had
I
I
mean-
mean, Devin just no chance.
Right.
None. There was nobody looking out for Devin ever.
Yeah. No matter which parent it was just nobody cared. And because nobody was there, they didn't care if he was playing video games 20 hours a day. Who cares? You know?
No.
As long as he raises himself, stays out of my hair, stays out of trouble, we're fine.
And then once the mom, there were periods of time where she was sober. She'd work nights. So he would just, his uncle had said, he was just able to do whatever for all these, not that he was doing anything bad, but just free time.
Yeah.
Idle hands are the devil's plaything.
Yep.
That's it. And just hours of video games.
That was his entire life.
Sad.
Devin pleaded not guilty and his trial began in 2005. The judge decided the defense could not introduce evidence claiming that Grand Theft Auto directly caused Devin's shooting spree. There was a lot of media hype around this. It was really coming up a lot, and everybody was blaming GTA at this point.
Yes.
But he wasn't allowed to directly use it in the defense or whatnot. The defense attorney, Jim Strandridge, said that Devin was suffering from PTSD when he committed the murders. The defense argued that the emotional and physical abuse that Devin had went through as a child had caused him to disassociate, like we said, and he was just disassociating from reality when he was stressed or triggered. The theory was that if stress had caused him to break from reality, he may have felt like he was playing the video game, and therefore he acted out what he'd seen so many times on his game, although they couldn't explicitly say that. Even though it was clear that the scene Devin acted out in the police station was straight out of GTA, with, of course, killing the police, stealing the car, the whole thing, the defense had to avoid directly blaming the game for the murders.
I mean, he still killed them.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah, whatever the reason was, that's not a good enough reason. There's a lot of people that play video games, like I always say, that don't murder people.
This is true.
So it's just not a valid enough defense. The defense attempted to prove that Devin was not guilty by reason of insanity, but the judge would not allow their expert witness to testify about how exactly video games had caused a violent rampage. So in August 2005, Devin was found guilty, and on October 9th, 2005, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Because this was a death penalty case, he got an automatic appeal.
Do you think that because they were police officers, that has anything to do with this 17-year-old kid getting death?
I think he was 18 by this
18
point
by the
because
time
you
he's
have to be an
convicted,
adult. Yeah. But I mean, yes, he was super young
To get
but
death like that?
it's got to be a factor, and also the amount of people. If someone is young and it's just one person, maybe possibly they could have been more lenient, but I definitely think 3 people and the fact that they were law enforcement, you can't just let that slide.
Because there's
And
17
probably making an example of him.
Yes.
Because if we let this happen, then how many other kids are playing GTA that are going to do the same thing? That's probably, especially with the media coverage, I think that's the thought process.
Yeah, because I know there's 17-year-olds that kill their whole families.
And
they
then
don't
get 15 years or something.
Or, life after 23, they can get parole.
Yeah. It does seem really additionally tragic that they would also sentence him to death, but he did take 3 lives.
Exactly.
So I think the judge had a really tough time on this one.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what is appropriate in this case. I mean, I don't know. It just also depends on where you fall on the death penalty too. So, but definitely 3 lives deserve a pretty harsh punishment.
Yes.
Even if you're not a death penalty person. So his appeal lawyer argued that the media coverage leading up to the trial tainted the jury pool, and it prevented Devin from getting an unbiased jury. The lawyer tried to prove that Devin's trial should have had a change of venue because of the pretrial publicity. On February 17th, 2012, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Devin's conviction in a 5-0 decision. So everybody agreed that he deserved the sentence.
Yes, they did.
Around the time of Devin's trial, there was a lot of coverage of the case and conversation about violence in video games in general. Attorney Jack Thompson, the anti-gaming violence advocate, did a publicity tour claiming that Grand Theft Auto trained Devin to perpetrate these acts of violence. Jack claimed that Grand Theft Auto was a, quote, murder simulator.
I mean, he's not wrong.
I mean, it's what you brought up earlier. I mean, it's something that simulators are used to train people in law enforcement, in armed forces. I mean, it's not really a foreign concept, especially for an impressionable child, you know?
I think it's also just, if he was reading sci-fi books or Lord of the Rings or something, right? Instead of this is what he's putting in his head.
Yeah. Can you imagine a world if he got into like comic books and started attending Comic-Con or something? He just needed something to latch onto.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
That's it. This was the thing.
He needed an escape from the kind of horror that was happening at home.
Could have been sports, but it was video games.
But again, it is the chicken and egg situation where it's like, okay, you're coming from a background of violence, then maybe there's an argument for you being more likely to seek out a violent hobby, The fact that Devin had no criminal history and, as far as we know, no experience with guns, but he was able to get 3 headshots, led a lot of people to believe that video games had an effect on Devin.
I see that argument.
For me, that's just so heavy. It is very clearly a murder simulator when you look at it that way.
I very clearly see that argument.
And again, I don't know if he had 0 experience with guns or maybe a little, but I really didn't find anything saying that, oh yeah, his dad and him went hunting or anything like that.
Nothing. And
From
he had
what
no
we know
criminal
is nothing.
record. No criminal record at all.
Yeah. And out of nowhere, he's just getting headshots. I mean, that's really speaks volumes about the effects of video games. With the help of attorney Jack Thompson, the victims' families sued Sony, GameStop, Walmart, and Take-Two Interactive, which is the parent company of Rockstar, for their involvement in the manufacturing and selling of Grand Theft Auto. The suit named Grand Theft Auto Vice City specifically because that edition of the game contains those scenes of infiltrating a police station and killing officers and stealing a police vehicle. It was directly what he did was in Vice City.
This is another thing that when I was reading this and looking into this, that it reminded me of Brendan Avery when he talks about Kiss the Girls, how he had, read it in a book and then he saw it in a movie or whatever, right? And it's like people say, well, he saw it, he read it, and therefore he did it. And it's another one of those with this. It's like what you put in your brain, what comes out.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Brendan was full of shit, but I believe this. And yeah, Vice City, it's all cops and murder and steal cars. I mean, it's exactly what he did.
Right.
And that's his whole world is just 20 hours straight of video games and putting this in your head. And I mean, it's pretty, I'm a square. I'm Kate Gosselin. It's 1 and 1 is 2.
No, it's true. I mean, it is very directly, it's not just something similar. It is specifically infiltrating a police station, committing a murder, stealing a cruiser.
Yep.
These are things that he had seen and played so many times. And that's exactly what happened in real life. So there's definitely a parallel to be drawn. Eventually, attorney Jack Thompson was actually removed from the case on November 18th, 2005, after a judge stated that, quote, Mr. Thompson's actions before this court suggest that he is unable to conduct himself in a manner befitting practice in this state. So he was completely removed from the case. Without Jack Thompson, the case basically stalled out and the families didn't pursue any further legal action.
They did not care about Devin when he was in their lives. They don't care about Devin now. And honestly, The families of the victims probably just want this to go away.
Yeah.
This is
Time
a
to
small
move
town.
on.
There's a lot of religion involved. Probably a lot of forgiveness. We're going to move forward. But his parents, they could give a shit.
Right.
We're not even talking about that side of the family.
Yeah.
The families are the police families.
Exactly. The families of the victims were definitely trying to get some justice, mostly at the urging of this attorney. But at the same time, once he was out of the picture, they, like you said, just wanted to move on. It's time for closure. It's time for healing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But definitely this is a huge case where, and one of the first ones where it was directly 1 and 1 equals 2. It was video games plus childhood equals murder, and it was portrayed heavily in the media. So that is our first gaming case for letter G.
This is awful.
I feel like I've aged about 20 years just in researching this.
That's how I kind of feel too. I mean, I like to consider myself pretty hip.
I've never felt
with
so
the times.
old in my life.
Man,
Yeah. It's also just so heavy, affecting so many children. When you look at the statistics we talked about early on, where it's 97% of kids between 12 and 17, knowing that so many kids are exposed to violent video games, and then seeing a case like this, it does become very sad and scary.
Yeah, and then there's also the flip side of like, well, he needed parental intervention. He needed a parent who was monitoring his, right? But as you're going to see with G for gaming, you can monitor, you can watch, you can have passwords. They're going to get through it. They want to kill you, they're going to kill you. They want to play video games, they're going to play the goddamn game. Like,
I feel like that's just the thing about childhood. Like, if you want to do something, you're going to do it no matter what your parents try and do to stop you.
Yeah.
You
can do everything.
I think everyone's lived that sort of thing. But there's something to be said for parents that just clearly, like Devin's parents, give zero fucks. They're just completely checked out. They don't care. As long as he's just keeping quiet, out of sight, out of mind, then they're
just trying to get him to 18 so they can kick his ass out or charge him for living with them.
Exactly.
That's what they're doing.
They're exactly those parents.
They are.
The charging rent parents.
And as long as the cops aren't coming to the door because he's under 18 at that point and they just take you back home, then he's not really a problem, but I've never been able to discipline him. And as soon as he is a problem, he was the problem, not the parents.
Right. No personal responsibility for their lack of parenting skills.
I can't believe his dad just said, God works in mysterious ways.
That was so sad.
That was quite a quote.
And his mother was obviously just so gone and checked out that we didn't even really see her coming forward during his court case. Like, she wasn't there. She didn't give any quotes. She didn't talk to anybody. But his dad was such an asshole. He did not care at all about his son.
I read something and I didn't really see it a ton of places. And I saw it in one of the little shows I watched about it. But that they had tried to call the mom. And the mom was just like, what's it about? I was like, nope, and hung up. Just basically was like, because she's in her own issue.
Yeah.
And just, nope, can't deal with this. So then he calls his dad, and that's what he gets from his dad. Like when he's taken in, and has to call somebody and say, I'm a murderer. Not the first time when it was just the 3 cops, but when it was the real murder charges. He called her and she just wanted nothing to do with it.
That's so sad.
It's just like he was just a throwaway.
But
why there's a whole thing, but like, why, it's like, why have kids? I mean, God, if you're just going to.
Yeah, if you're just going to sit him in front of video games.
God works in mysterious ways. What are you going to say? Things happen.
But it is really just, there's so many other risk factors that have to be present to make violent video games really that damaging. Like, sure, there's aggression and whatnot, but when we see these things that we're discussing on these cases, they're going to always have some other components. And this really, really abusive parenting is, it's just awful. Like, obviously the combination of abuse and PTSD resulting from the abuse plus the video games was just a deadly cocktail. And people died, because these parents couldn't be bothered to intervene with their children and actually be an active parent. That's just infuriating.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I just never, I don't know.
It's something you don't think about unless you really look into it.
Interesting. Yeah, video games was never. And you know, it's funny because I mean, we didn't even like my house. We didn't even have cable until I was in like high school. So, you know, I remember I got a Super Nintendo from someone because they got like a cool new thing. So I was like a senior in high school when they were like, "Here, you can have my old Super Nintendo." That is when I played Super Mario World, and my favorite was 3, the one where he has the raccoon tail, where he can fly.
Yeah.
That's it. There it is. Like, that's my knowledge. Got it. That's it.
Yeah, I think I always liked video games. I mean, I used to play with neighbors, and then I asked for consoles myself, and then I kind of just got away from it in like high school and then came back. My friends were playing video games, so then I got into first-person shooters. Doesn't really make me feel violent or aggressive, but I don't know. I always thought it was just fun.
It was a game. That's what it was a game to you.
Yeah, it's just a game.
It was just a game. Something to do. Something for half hour. Whatever.
Or like, 4 days straight or
that.
Whatever it is. But yeah, you don't really think about it until, there start coming out these reports of studies that are done. And unless you look into it, or unless you have kids and you're really considering parental controls, it's not something you would consider. But when G came up, that was one of the first things that I thought was like, well, let's do gamers. I mean, we know that there's a bunch of cases where games have been at minimum blamed, whether it's true or not. So let's look into that,
And then there's other there was one that I was looking at that honestly I wanted us to talk about, but not I don't know, like it couldn't be that deep. It was the one where the 9-year-old shot the other kid.
Yes.
For the controller.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, yes, video games caused this.
Right.
But there's also like, what the hell? Give me the controller. Oh, you're not. I'm going to get this gun and then I'm going to come back and shoot you and kill you, 9-year-old kid. These are children. These are elementary school children.
Yeah. That's so young.
How do they know to even, right?
And the only parallel to draw is that they only know that because of video games.
That's it.
Because they needed to shoot someone and they got rewarded for it. So obviously they're going to get the controller.
And the little
if they
girl
shoot.
didn't respawn. Isn't that weird? Because that's what they thought would happen. That's what I kept reading that again and again, or like not having the concept of the finality of death.
Right.
And that if they kill them, well, they'll just respawn.
Right.
Which is so, child brain. But
yes. But if that's, something you're practicing all the time.
That's not reality.
Then that becomes your reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So.
Please be safe, everyone.
Right. Be very careful.
Please just be nice to these kids when you're gaming, I guess, because they're going to kill us if you keep taking their lives and making them cry. And
yeah, if you do game online, whoever is listening,
nice.
Please just don't make any enemies.
I'm so scared for everyone.
These teenagers are coming for us.
10-year-olds.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty
scared.
crazy. So we are definitely going to be back with another gamer case next week. Yeah.
If I can make
You're
it.
still okay? Like, I'm looking at you like, are we all right?
Yeah,
Or
we're fine.
We're going to be okay?
We're going to live. We're going to live.
So before we get out of here, I just wanted to say thank you again to the new people on our Patreon. So thank you again to Bridget, who increased her pledge. Traduce or Traduce, not sure.
I like Traduce.
Traduce. You know
That's
what?
what I keep saying.
That's a great option too.
Judice.
And then also thank you to Rebecca and Rachel, my elementary school bullies that have finally come around.
You know what's so funny too is I think I might be wrong, but the first thing I was like, Rebecca and Rachel, like the Bible? But I think it's Rachel and Sarah are the sisters in the Bible. But
you know more about the Bible than me.
Very little. Side note, hey guys, go leave us a review.
Yeah.
5 stars.
If you haven't reviewed us so far, we would really appreciate that.
And if
That
it's
would be
not 5
awesome.
stars, give it to someone else. No. I'm just kidding.
If it's 4 or less, you are thinking of another podcast.
There's this
that
other
is not
podcast.
us.
Gosh, I can't remember the name. What is it?
So yeah, we appreciate you, new people on Patreon. If you want to join our Patreon, it's patreon.com/Murder Dictionary podcast. And again, we have all that linked in the show notes. If you're not following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we are slowly creeping towards that verified 10K followers on Instagram. So you should help us get there.
We should check now. It might have already happened.
We all need goals in life, you know? So yeah, and reviews. And if you're doing those things, we really appreciate you. So
We love you anyway. Thank you for listening.
We love you no matter what. So we'll see you next week with another gamer, if Courtney can make it.
We'll see.
So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've heard the stories of bloody murder and horrendous homicide. But what about the rest of the crimes people fall victim to every day? What about the forensic chemist who falsified evidence? Or the con man who pretended to be a surgeon? What happened to the rich men who kidnapped an entire bus of children? Who are the fraudsters, arsonists, bank robbers, drug lords, and more? I'm Lindsay, the host of Mugshot. Mugshot is a true crime podcast that brings you the non-murderous crimes you didn't know you needed to hear. Season 2 started in January of 2019, so come and join me by searching for Mugshot on your favorite podcatcher. Until then, stay out of trouble, or you may end up pictured in your very own mugshot.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
and learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance. And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
and learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.